Hey everyone, this is Mike and welcome to F2F Tech. In today's video we're going to be benchmarking multiple older video cards in the newly released Far Cry New Dawn. This is a follow-up to the Metro Exodus video I released a couple of weeks ago. If you haven't already watched that video, then please check it out by clicking the link above. Graphically speaking, not a whole lot has changed when comparing Far Cry New Dawn to last year's Far Cry 5. New Dawn is set in a post-apocalyptic Hope County, which means the landscape has changed a bit with the introduction of Super Bloom, aka a crap ton of pink flowers everywhere. The good news is they didn't sprout from Nvidia seeds, so they're not overly tessellated. Joking aside, Far Cry 5 and New Dawn tend to perform a bit better on AMD hardware. Anyway, in today's testing we'll be measuring performance of 11 video cards at 1080p. We'll use 3 graphical presets and we'll use the built-in benchmark to get our numbers. But before we jump into today's results, let's take a look at the contenders and the clock speeds used for each. First up is Baby GCN, also known as the HD 7770 1GB. Next we have the amazing Matrix HD 5870 Platinum, sporting 2GB of VRAM. Now on to the HD 6950, which has the extra shaders unlocked and its power limit and core clocks have been increased to that of a true HD 6970. Now here's the legendary HD 7970 GHz edition, basking in all of its glory. And the last AMD card is the R9 390. It's time to jump over to the green side of the fence, so starting things off is the 2080 Ti destroying GT 1030. Next we have the heating appliance known as the GTX 480, and moving on we have the robust GTX 580 Classified, equipped with 3GB of VRAM. Let's move on to the GTX 670 for the win, which is nearly as fast as the GTX 680 out of the box. And the second to last card is the meaty GTX 780 Lightning. Last but not least is the MSI-made GTX 1060 6GB OEM card. Now that we got to see all the cards and the clock speeds they were tested at, let's take a look at the specs for today's test system. Alright, jumping right into the results, let's start things off with the low preset. And here we can see the 1060 sits on top with 95 frames per second on average. It ends up being 13% faster than the R9 390. The 7970 GHz edition ends up being 13% faster than the GTX 780 Lightning. The GTX 670 edges out the 580 Classy by around 18%, and the 6970 is getting around 30 FPS on average, but it lags behind the 580 by around 18%. The GT 1030 is about equal with the 9-year-old flagships. You might have also noticed a less than stellar 1% and 0.1% lows for the R9 390. This doesn't have anything to do with stutter or frame time inconsistencies, it's just extreme frame rate variability, and I'll explain it more in detail here shortly. Moving right along with the normal preset, and things look a little bit different. The GTX 1060 still maintains its lead over the 390, but it's only by 11%. The GHz edition strengthens its lead over the 780, besting it by 15%. And with low settings, we saw the GTX 670 beat out the 580 by around 18%, but with these settings, the lead shrinks to 8%. The 580 ends up leaving the 6970 behind by around 25%, and again, the little 1030 is sweating alongside the oldies here. And the HD 7770 isn't playable at all. For the last test we cranked it up to the high preset, and the GTX 1060 still leads a little bit over the 390, sitting at about 14% faster. The GTX 780 can't catch a break here, as the GHz edition is still making a mockery out of this old beast. The GTX 670's lead grows over the 580 as it's about 12% faster. The other cards are no longer in playable territory. Still, with that being said, most if not all of the cards end up with solid frame times, as this game does a great job with video memory management. As you can see, the results don't differ a whole lot when comparing them to my recent Metro Exodus benchmarking video. The 1060 still leads the pack, with 390 following close behind. It's not too surprising to see the 7970 GHz edition beat out the GTX 780, as we saw the same thing in the Far Cry 5 GPU shootout I did last year. The biggest change here is the GTX 670 beating out the 580 Classified in this title, where the Classy had the edge in Metro. Now let's take a look at the R9 390 performance anomalies, and I recorded benchmark runs for both the 7970 GHz edition and the R9 390 just to kind of show you what's going on here. And as you can see, the 390 is off to a much better start, sitting where it should be over the 7970 GHz edition. As we get about halfway through the benchmark, right past this wall, performance for the 390 starts to take a nosedive. Performance for the rest of the built-in benchmark doesn't look that great as well. Now, I reran this multiple times and I tried multiple drivers, and I was still faced with the same conclusion. I'm not seeing any evidence of a CPU bottleneck here, so I'm not exactly sure what's causing this issue. If you happen to own this game and an R9 390, I'd love for anyone to chime in with the results they have. Alright people, well this is a much shorter video than I normally produce, but like I mentioned, I benchmarked all of these cards alongside my Metro Exodus testing, and I'm working on my next big video, so get subscribed if you haven't already. Also, if you want to spread some love by using my affiliate links found in the video's description, I would greatly appreciate it. Lastly, if you want to join Pixel Pipes, Cutting Edge Retro, and myself in the Pixel Talk Discord server, I'll leave a link to that in the video's description. And as always, thanks for taking the time to watch the video.